So today we're talking about Android and whether or not skins that ride on top of the OS are evil or not, and what sort of use they have as the underlying OS gets more mature and more sleek. And there's been a lot of controversy, especially around HTC, just because they're one of the first out of the gate with a skin that's running on top of Ice Cream Sandwich. And there's been some reviews, positive and negative, around it. I mean, Sascha, maybe we could start with you. In your experience with this skin, right, and anyone who calls it that in front of the companies get really offended because they say we have a deeper level of integration, we're doing a lot more stuff. But a lot of people call it that as sort of a derogatory term. How do you think that this is evolving? Is it evolving in the right way? Is it still too heavy?
I think Sense 4.0 on Android Ice Cream Sandwich is a lot lighter than Sense 3.6 was. And in general, I'm pretty pro these skins because I write for consumers. I want a phone to do pretty much everything it needs to do out of the box. And I want it to operate, frankly, pretty out of the box.
Right.
I often find that a lot of the guys I talk to who hate skins are people who do heavy configuration on their own devices. They start talking to me about XDA forums, they start talking to me about CyanogenMod and rooting, and in that case, yeah, you're basically building your own skin. But for the vast majority of consumers out there, Android does tend to start out a little stark, missing a couple of key things. Facebook integration is the biggest one by far.
Right.
And these, HTC Sense can add an extra layer of smoothness to the experience.
Now, Chris, you were one of the first to review the 1X, the international version, and I feel like your opinion of Sense 4.0 in particular was mixed. And what was your overall opinion? Do you feel like they didn't quite make enough progress?
So you can definitely see that they took some of the criticism to heart in Sense 4. There's no question about it. In particular, one of the things that really drove me nuts prior to 4 was the fact that they took up, what was it, a quarter or a third of the notification drop-down with a recent apps list, which really served no practical purpose, in my opinion. And of course, the keyboard isn't very good either. I think that if you ask any reviewer, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I feel like virtually any third-party keyboard is superior to the keyboard that they use in Sense, and that hasn't changed in Sense 4, unfortunately.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think that they've gone far enough. I think that the notion of this OEM customization of Android is kind of antiquated at this point, because they're still looking at it from a pre-ICS view where, frankly, the UX sucked. And then they brought in Matthias Forte, of course, and he made a lot of changes in Android 4, and we're seeing that, and I think that it's far better than it's ever been before.
Right.
Unfortunately, what's really ironic to me is that the experience, the so-called stock Android experience that you get on the Galaxy Nexus, you'd think that would be like this broad base of devices that are using this, and then you have a few other devices that are customizing on top of that. But actually the opposite is true. It's virtually impossible to get the stock experience. There are very few phones that offer that, and they're few and far between. The Galaxy Nexus on Verizon, of course, is one of the very few.
Right. So. But at the same time, they have done some things, just playing devil's advocate, that HTC has done that I think add to the user experience. Just something as simple as the lock screen itself and being able to unlock it to some of your favorite applications, what they've done with the camera app. So they're certainly adding value in some instances.
I think they're really, it comes down to that there are two classes of things that manufacturers are doing with these skins.
Right.
And class number one is sometimes, and this is kind of what I'm championing, they are genuinely adding functionality. HTC's drag to the ring for lock screen adds functionality. HTC's integrating Facebook into the contact list adds functionality. Motorola's social music player with the integrated lyrics that automatically load with every song you play, that adds functionality. But a lot of these companies are doing certain things just to differentiate. And Samsung changing all of the icons in the system randomly for no apparent purpose is probably my biggest peeve there.
Right. So is there a risk of fragmenting? So Android is already fragmented in and of itself. When you have the manufacturers having their own skins riding on top, or software riding on top of Android, are they fragmenting the platform themselves? Or do you disagree with that?
Well, they're not fragmenting the platform in terms of what I worry most from a fragmentation perspective is from a developer perspective, and has to do with the compatibility of third-party apps. And typically the skins don't affect that. What they are fragmenting is the user experience
Right.
and how consumers can become fluent with one particular version of Android, and then they pick up a different phone, say from Samsung, and they're not fluent with that. And of course, the goal there from the OEM's perspective is to create lock-in on that OEM's products. So
Right.
from their perspective, that's actually a good thing, whereas from a consumer perspective, it may not be.
Right, so someone who's used to a HTC device and they see the weather clock and then they go to an LG or something else, is like, well, where's that? And they might run back to an HTC device or something like that.
Or take that LG. LG has this crazy multiple drawer file cabinet thing
Right.
With its apps tray. And everyone I know who has a non-LG Android phone, who's picked up an LG phone and looked at that, has been, what the heck? Is this even Android?
It's confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So skins aren't going away anytime soon, nor do I think they should, because I think they, in the best case scenario, they add value. But OEMs could certainly be more thoughtful about what they include, especially if they have Google's help.
Well, and I think in terms of why a lot of people complain about skins has to do with their hit on speed and memory. And that's something that HTC has really improved going from Sense 3.6 to Sense 4. And it's something that OEMs need to pay a lot more attention to. I mean, if you look at benchmark results on Samsung TouchWiz phones, you see pretty clearly the hit to performance that's the effect of TouchWiz.
Right.
And OEMs have to say, you know, are all of these random icon changes worth a hit to performance?
Okay, so Chris, what's your final take? What do you think is next for this whole dynamic?
Well, I do think that Sony's model, which frankly I think they kind of pioneered, and Sense 4 has in some ways adopted, I think that is the correct model. That's the way that these OEMs need to go. They need to turn their experiences, quote unquote, into widgets, into apps, and into enhancements to the stock Android look and feel. And I think that maybe over the next 2 to 3 versions of some of these major skins, for lack of a better word, we're going to see them move in that direction, at least I hope.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot for your time, guys. I don't think this debate is going to be settled anytime soon.